My dad always called me just a lowly teacher, like my work didn't count unless it came with power and applause. Then I found a paper trail that didn't belong in a school. Leases, grants, names that kept repeating like a threat. They tried to make me look unstable, to push me out quietly. But the night I sat under those studio lights, I stopped whispering, and my father finally saw me. The alarm clock buzzed at exactly 5:30 in the morning, a sound that always felt less like a wake-up call and more like a warning shot. I slapped a hand onto the plastic button to silence it, listening to the hum of the refrigerator through the thin walls of my apartment. It was a one-bedroom unit on the south side of Harbor Glen, a place that smelled permanently of damp drywall and other people's cooking. I sat up and rubbed the sleep from my eyes. My name is Julia Foster. I was 33 years old, and according to the bank statement currently sitting on my kitchen counter, I had exactly $412 to last me until the end of the month. The morning routine was a race against the clock. Shower, coffee that tasted burnt because I was trying to stretch the grounds for an extra 2 days, grading papers while I shoveled oatmeal into my mouth. I was a history teacher at Harbor Glen High, a massive brick fortress built in the 1970s that was currently holding 2,000 students, despite being designed for 1,500. By the time I pulled my 10-year-old sedan into the faculty lot, the sun was struggling to break through the gray, overcast sky. The parking lot was already full. I squeezed my car into a spot near the dumpsters, grabbed my tote bag, which was heavy with unchecked essays, and headed inside. My first period was American history. 34 students were crammed into a room with 30 desks. 4 of them had to sit on stools I had salvaged from the science lab storage closet. "Ms. Foster, do we have to read the whole chapter?" a boy in the back row asked before the bell even stopped ringing. "Yes. Marcus," I said, dropping my bag on the desk. "You have to read the whole chapter because history does not make sense if you only look at the pictures." The day was a blur of noise and friction. The air conditioning in the West Wing was broken again, making the hallway smell like locker room sweat and floor wax. During my planning period, which was supposed to be for grading, I spent 45 minutes counseling a sophomore who was terrified to go home because her parents were fighting. Then I spent the last 10 minutes eating a granola bar over a trash can while answering emails from parents demanding to know why their child had an 89 instead of a 90. When the final bell rang at 3:15, my day was only half over. I ran the debate program, one of the few extracurriculars that had not been slashed in the last round of budget cuts, mostly because it cost the district almost nothing. We met in my classroom. The kids were the best part of the job. They were sharp, hungry for information, and desperate for someone to take them seriously. I stayed until 5:30, coaching them on affirmative arguments for next month's resolution on infrastructure spending. Then, after the last student was picked up, I drove to a private home in the wealthy suburb of Oak Creek to tutor a middle schooler in social studies for an hour. That $60 cash was the only reason I could afford the premium on my car insurance. By the time I got back to my apartment, it was nearly 8 o'clock. I was exhausted in my bones, but I could not just collapse. Tonight was the 3rd Tuesday of the month. Family dinner. My parents lived in Crestmore Ridge, a neighborhood that was only 5 miles from my apartment, but might as well have been on a different planet. The streets there were lined with manicured oaks, and the driveways were paved with crushed stone that crunched satisfyingly under the tires of luxury SUVs. I parked my battered sedan on the street, so it would not leak oil on their driveway. The house was a sprawling colonial with white pillars and black shutters. It was beautiful, imposing, and cold. When I walked inside, the silence hit me. It was not the peaceful silence of rest. It was the heavy, judgmental silence of a museum. "Julia," my mother called from the dining room. "You are late." I checked my watch. "I am 3 minutes late." "Mom." Traffic on the connector was backed up. She emerged from the kitchen, holding a crystal decanter of red wine. Eleanor Foster was a woman who treated aging like a personal insult she refused to acknowledge. Her hair was a perfect, immobile helmet of blonde, and her clothes were always tailored to within an inch of their life. "Your father is already seated," she said. turning back without looking at me. Go wash your hands. You look like you have been in a coal mine. I went to the powder room and looked at myself in the mirror. My cardigan was slightly frayed at the cuff. There was a smudge of dry erase marker on my cheek. I scrubbed it off with a paper towel, took a deep breath, and walked into the dining room. My father, Robert Foster, sat at the head of the table. He was a man made of sharp angles and hard opinions. He had made his money in commercial insurance, a career he spoke of with the reverence most people reserved for religious callings. "Hello? Dad?" I said, taking my usual seat. He looked up from his phone, his eyes scanning me briefly before returning to the screen. "Julia, did you get the oil changed in that car yet? I can hear the lifters ticking from the front porch." "Not yet," I said, unfolding my napkin. "I am waiting for payday." He let out a short, sharp breath through his nose, a sigh of disappointment. Of course, payday. The dinner was roast lamb with mint jelly. It was delicious, and I hated that I was hungry enough to eat it quickly. I tried to slow down, to match their deliberate, mannered pacing. "So," my mother said, slicing a piece of meat the size of a postage stamp, "Caleb called today." My stomach tightened. Caleb was my younger brother, the golden child. He worked for a biotech firm in Boston. "Oh?" I said. "How is he?" "He is fantastic," my father said, finally putting his phone down. "He just secured the regional director position. At 29 years old, his base salary is now double what I was making at 40. "That is great," I said. I meant it. I loved Caleb, but I hated how his success was always used as a bludgeon to batter me. "He is looking at buying a house on the Cape," my mother added. "A vacation home. He wants us to come up for the summer," I nodded, pushing a potato around my plate. "And how is the babysitting going?" my father asked. I stopped chewing. "I am a teacher. Dad, I teach American history and civics." My father waved his hand dismissively. "Same thing. You watch other people's children while they go do real work. It is glorified babysitting." "Julia, I do not know why you insist on struggling like this. If you had just listened to me and gone to law school, we would not be having conversations about you waiting for payday to fix your car." "I teach because it matters," I said, my voice tight. "I am helping these kids learn how to think, how to participate in the world." "Does it pay the rent?" he asked. "Does it build equity?" "No, it drains you. You look tired." "Julia, you look 10 years older than you are. I am tired because I work hard." I said, "You work hard for nothing," he countered. "Success is not just about effort, it is about return on investment. You are pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom." I looked at my mother, hoping for some defense, but she just took a sip of her wine. "Your father just wants you to be secure," she said softly. "We worry about you, living in that neighborhood, driving that car. It is beneath you. It is what I can afford." I said, "That is exactly the point." My father snapped. "You are 33. You should be able to afford more. You chose a path of mediocrity. Julia, do not expect us to applaud it." I finished the meal in silence. When I left, my father tried to press $200 into my hand. "Get the oil changed," he said. I looked at the money. I needed it. I needed it desperately. But I pulled my hand away. "I will handle it. Dad, thank you for dinner." I drove home with the windows down, letting the cold air sting my face. I was angry, but beneath the anger was a terrifying layer of fear. He was right. I was struggling. One major car repair, one medical emergency, and I would be underwater. The next morning, the pressure at school shifted from the physical to the existential. I was called into the principal's office during my prep period. Principal Vance was a man who smiled too much with his mouth and never with his eyes. He motioned for me to sit in the low chair across from his desk, a tactical furniture arrangement that forced me to look up at him. "Julia, thanks for coming in," he said, clasping his hands on his desk. "Is everything okay?" I asked. He sighed, a theatrical performance of regret. "We are looking at the projections for the next fiscal year. The district is tightening the belt again. Enrollment is fluctuating, and the board is asking us to maximize efficiency. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. What does that mean? It means we need everyone to stay flexible, he said. We are reviewing all non-tenured contracts and even some of the tenured positions based on program enrollment. I just wanted to give you a heads up. Some teachers will not be renewed, but my evaluations are perfect. I said, my students have the highest state test scores in the department. Vance nodded. You are a great teacher. Julia, we know that, but sometimes it is a numbers game. Just keep your head down. Be a team player. We need to show the district that we are aligned with their vision. Do not give anyone a reason to look at your line item on the budget sheet. I walked out of his office feeling like the floor was tilting. I was being positioned. I was expendable. I tried to shake it off. I had work to do. That afternoon, I stayed late to help Tessa Lang, one of my brightest debate students, with a scholarship application. Tessa was brilliant, fierce, and lived in a motel on the edge of town with her mother. She needed a full ride, or she was not going to college. We sat at my desk, surrounded by stacks of tax forms and transcripts. Miss Foster, look at this, Tessa said, pointing to the eligibility section of the application. It asks for all the extracurricular programs I have been in. List the debate team, obviously. I said, and the student council. No. Look at the drop-down menu. She said, it lists Bright Steps Scholar as a priority qualification. What is that? Bright Steps? I said, they are the foundation that partners with the district. They fund the computer lab and the after-school tutoring center. Tessa frowned. I go to the tutoring center every Tuesday. I have never seen anyone from Bright Steps there. It is just Mr. Henderson sleeping in the back while we do homework. I leaned in and looked at the screen. The application was for a state-level grant, but the partner organization managing it was the Bright Steps Learning Foundation. I started clicking through the other tabs. Bright Steps was listed everywhere. They were listed as the provider for the SAT prep course, the provider for the STEM initiative, and the sponsor of the debate tournament we were going to next month. That is weird, I muttered. What? Tessa asked. The SAT prep course. I said, the district canceled that last semester because of funding, but here it says Bright Steps provided services for 500 students. Maybe they just messed up the paperwork? Tessa suggested. Maybe. I said, but the name stuck in my head. Bright Steps. 2 days later, I was required to attend the Bright Steps Teacher Appreciation Gala. As the debate sponsor, my attendance was mandatory. It was held at the Grandview Hotel downtown, in a ballroom that cost more to rent for one night than I made in a year. I wore a black dress I had owned since college, pinning it at the waist to make it look more modern. The room was filled with round tables covered in satin cloths. There were centerpieces made of orchids and hydrangeas. The guests were a mix of district administrators, local politicians, and wealthy donors. The teachers were scattered among them, looking uncomfortable and underdressed. I stood near the buffet, nursing a glass of lukewarm iced tea. I watched as a photographer arranged a group of students on the stage. They were holding oversized checks and smiling. I recognized 2 of them. They were not scholarship recipients. They were the children of the school board president. Smile big, the photographer shouted. Show us that gratitude. It felt gross. It felt like a petting zoo. I moved toward the edge of the room to escape the flashbulbs. I found myself standing behind a heavy velvet curtain that separated the ballroom from the service corridor. I was about to turn back when I heard voices. Need to accelerate the timeline, a man's voice said. It was deep, confident. We can't push too hard, another voice replied. The union is already asking questions about the staffing ratios. Screw the union, the first man said. We are turning these classrooms into assets. If they want the grant money, they play by our rules. The real value isn't in the instruction. Gary, it is in the footprint. We get the operational control. We control the contracts. I froze, turning classrooms into assets. I peeked around the curtain. It was a member of the Bright Steps board, a man I recognized from the program brochure. Talking to the superintendent of the school district, they clinked their champagne glasses and laughed. I stepped back. my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt like I had walked in on something private and dirty. The following Monday, the feeling of unease had not left me. I was sitting at my desk during my planning period, grading essays on the Industrial Revolution, when an email pinged into my inbox. It was from the district finance office. The subject line was, "Agenda items for Tuesday meeting. Attachment." I clicked it without thinking. It was a mass email, usually sent to all staff, but as soon as I opened the attachment, I knew it was a mistake. It was an Excel spreadsheet, but it wasn't the usual list of faculty meeting times or cafeteria menus. It was a budget breakdown for the Bright Steps Partnership allocation. I scanned the rows. Textbook procurement, $18,000. Software licensing, $12,000. Those looked normal, but then I scrolled down. Facility consultation, $150,000. Site readiness assessment, $85,000. Vendor, Apex Strategies, real estate. I blinked. Real estate? Why was an education grant paying $250,000 to a real estate firm for site readiness? We weren't building anything. We couldn't even afford to fix the air conditioning. I stared at the name, Apex Strategies Real Estate. My pulse started to speed up. This wasn't right. I printed the page. I walked down the hallway to the administrative wing. The paper folded inside my gradebook. I went to the operations manager's office. His name was Greg Miller. He was a nervous man who always looked like he was hiding a smoking cigarette. "Hey, Greg," I said, knocking on the doorframe. He looked up, startled. "Julia, what can I do for you?" I walked in and closed the door behind me. "I just got that email from finance, the one with the attachment." His face went pale instantly. "Oh, yeah, that was sent in error. Please delete it. We're sending out a recall notice now. I just had a question about one of the line items." I said, playing dumb. "I saw something about facility consultation. Does that mean we're finally getting the AC fixed in the West Wing?" I pulled the paper out and placed it on his desk, pointing to the line for Apex Strategies. Greg didn't look at the paper. He looked at me, and his eyes were hard. "That doesn't concern your department, Julia." "I know, but if there is money for site readiness, I was just hoping—" "Those are strategic allocations," he interrupted, his voice sharp. "They are above your pay grade. Way above. You need to focus on your classroom and let the administration handle the budget." He stood up, signaling the conversation was over. "And Julia?" I paused at the door. "Yes? Delete that email and shred that printout. We don't want misinformation spreading among the staff." I nodded slowly. "Sure, Greg." I walked back to my classroom, my hands trembling. He hadn't just been dismissive. He had been scared. I didn't shred the paper. I folded it smaller and put it in the zippered pocket of my purse. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop. The apartment was dark, lit only by the blue glow of the screen. I felt ridiculous, like I was pretending to be a detective in a bad movie, but I couldn't shake the image of Greg's pale face. I pulled up the county clerk's website, Public Records. I typed in Apex Strategies Real Estate. No results. I tried the State Business Registry. There it was. Apex Strategies, LLC, incorporated 2 years ago. The registered agent was a lawyer in the capital. The business address was a suite in an office park on the north side of the city. I typed the address into a map search, 4401 Industrial Way, Suite B. Then I searched the address itself. Another company popped up at the same address, Clearview Consulting. I searched Clearview Consulting. I found a list of campaign finance disclosures for the last school board election. Clearview Consulting had donated the maximum allowable amount to 3 different candidates, including the board president. I sat back in my chair. The grant money went from the school to Bright Steps to Apex Strategies for Consulting, which shared an address with a company that funded the people who approved the grants. It was a circle, a washing machine for money. I felt a sudden wave of nausea. This wasn't just mismanagement. This was theft, and it was happening while I was buying glue sticks with my own money and taping up my students' textbooks because the bindings were falling apart. I closed the laptop. I told myself I was crazy. I was connecting dots that weren't there. My father was right. I was just a lowly teacher. I didn't understand how high-level finance worked. Maybe site readiness was a legitimate term for something boring and legal. I told myself to drop it. I needed this job. I couldn't afford to make waves. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. I waited a minute, then picked up the phone to listen to the message. Ms. Foster? This is Sarah from the Bright Steps engagement team. We just wanted to reach out and thank you for being so engaged with our programs recently. We noticed you've been taking a close look at our initiatives. We would love to discuss how we can support your career growth. We prefer partners who are on the team. Give us a call back. The voice was bright, cheerful, and professional, but the message was clear. We know you are looking. I looked at the dark window of my apartment. Suddenly, the blinds felt too thin. The lock on the door felt too flimsy. I had barely started pulling the thread, and already, someone on the other end was pulling back. I saved the voicemail, and for the first time in my life, I was afraid to go to school the next day. I sat at my kitchen table, the glow of the laptop screen painting my face in a cold, blue light. It was 2 a.m. The apartment was silent, save for the rhythmic dripping of the faucet I had been meaning to fix for 6 months. My finger hovered over the trackpad. On the screen was the Harbor Glen Independent School District Ethics and Compliance Portal. It was a sterile web page designed in calming shades of blue and gray, featuring stock photos of smiling, diverse professionals shaking hands. It promised anonymity. It promised a safe harbor for those who witnessed misconduct. I had spent the last 3 hours drafting my statement. I had written it, deleted it, and rewritten it until it was stripped of all emotion. I removed the fear. I removed the speculation about money laundering. I stuck to the hard, cold facts. On October 14th, I received an email attachment in error titled, Budget Breakdown, Bright Steps Partnership. The document lists payments to Apex Strategies Real Estate for facility consultation. Apex Strategies shares a registered address with Clearview Consulting, a major donor to school board campaigns. These expenditures do not align with the stated educational goals of the grant. I attached the PDF of the spreadsheet. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was the right thing to do. This was the process. If I did not report it, I was complicit. But as I stared at the submit button, I could hear my father's voice in the back of my head. You are creating drama. I pushed the thought away. I clicked submit. A confirmation number popped up on the screen. Report ID 89442. I wrote the number down on a sticky note and tucked it inside the cover of my favorite history textbook. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for days. It was done. It was in the system now. Someone with authority, someone whose job it was to care about the law, would see it. I went to bed, but I did not sleep. 48 hours later, the intercom in my classroom buzzed during third period. Ms. Foster, the secretary's voice crackled. Please report to the principal's office immediately. We have coverage for your class. The students looked up. Getting called to the office in the middle of a lesson was rare. Is everything okay? Ms. Foster? Tessa Lang asked from the front row. I forced a smile that felt like it was made of glass. Fine, just administrative stuff. Read the section on the T Act silently until I get back. I walked down the long, waxed hallway. My heels clicked on the linoleum. The school felt different today. The lockers seemed taller, the air heavier. When I entered Principal Vance's office, he was not alone. Sitting in the chair next to his desk was a woman I did not recognize. She was wearing a charcoal gray suit that looked expensive, and her hair was pulled back into a severe bun. She had a notepad on her lap. Julia, come in, Vance said. He did not smile. He did not motion for me to sit. This is Ms. Sterling from District Human Resources, he said. Ms. Sterling did not offer her hand. Ms. Foster, we are here to discuss a serious breach of district protocol regarding data privacy and internal security. I blinked. I felt the blood drain from my face. I don't understand. Vance slid a piece of paper across his desk. It was a printout of the ethics report I had filed. You accessed a confidential financial document that was not intended for your distribution, Vance said. And then, instead of deleting it as instructed by the operations manager, you uploaded it to an external server. I stared at him. That is the ethics portal. I said, it is the district's own system. I was reporting a discrepancy. You were distributing sensitive vendor data without authorization. Ms. Sterling cut in. Her voice was flat, devoid of inflection. That document contained proprietary information regarding district partnerships. By retaining it and uploading it, you violated the acceptable use policy you signed when you were hired. I felt like the room was spinning. No, wait, you are twisting this. The document showed payments to a real estate firm. I was reporting. What you were doing, Vance interrupted, his voice rising, was conducting an unauthorized audit based on incomplete data. You are a history teacher. Julia. You are not an auditor. You are not a forensic accountant. He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. We are going to treat this as a first warning, he said. A formal reprimand will be placed in your file for misuse of internal documents. If there is another incident, if you access, share, or discuss confidential district business again, we will move to termination proceedings. Termination? I whispered. For using the ethics portal? For theft of data. Ms. Sterling corrected. I walked out of the office 10 minutes later. My hands were shaking so hard I had to ball them into fists to hide it. They had flipped it. They had taken the evidence of their corruption and turned it into a weapon against me. I went to the faculty lounge during lunch. I needed to talk to someone. I needed to know I wasn't crazy. Marin Pike was sitting at the round table in the corner, eating a salad out of a Tupperware container. Marin had taught English at Harbor Glen for 20 years. She was the union rep, a woman who knew where all the bodies were buried. I sat down next to her. I looked around to make sure the room was empty. Marin, I said quietly, they just wrote me up. Marin didn't look up from her salad. She kept chewing, her jaw moving rhythmically. What for? For using the ethics portal. I said, I found something. Marin, in the budget, the grant money. She stopped chewing. She put her fork down slowly. Don't, she said. I looked at her. Don't what? Don't finish that sentence, she said. She finally looked at me, and her eyes were filled with a weary kind of fear I had never seen in her before. Julia, listen to me. Do you know why Mr. Henderson teaches remedial math in the basement now? He used to be the department head. I shook my head. He asked questions about the construction contract for the new gym. Marin said, he made a fuss at a board meeting. 2 weeks later, he was transferred. They gave him the schedule nobody wanted. They made his life hell until he stopped talking. But this is fraud, I whispered. This is survival. Marin hissed. She leaned in closer. This district runs on favors and silence. You are a good teacher. You have a pension to think about. You have rent. Do not throw yourself on a grenade for something you cannot change. She picked up her fork again. If you make noise, you don't just get fired. You get erased. They will put you in a classroom with no windows and 30 kids with behavioral plans and no aid. And they will wait for you to quit. She stood up, took her salad, and walked to the trash can. I wouldn't mention this to anyone else if I were you, she said over her shoulder. People talk, and right now, the walls have ears. I sat there alone in the lounge, the smell of stale coffee and fear hanging in the air. The following week, I tried to focus on the one thing that still felt pure, the debate team. We had the regional qualifiers on Saturday. My students had been prepping for months. They were arguing the nuances of urban planning and economic disparity. Ironic, considering what I knew. But I channeled my frustration into coaching them. They crushed it. Tessa Lang and her partner, David, swept the floor with a private school team that had professional coaches. When the results were posted, Harbor Glen was at the top of the list. We had qualified for the state tournament in the capital. The bus ride home was electric. The kids were singing, passing around bags of chips, high on the adrenaline of intellectual victory. "We are going to state," David yelled. "We are actually going to state." I smiled, watching them in the rearview mirror. For a moment, the heavy cloud over my head lifted. This was why I did it. This was the work that mattered. On Monday morning, I submitted the paperwork for the trip. The state tournament was 3 weeks away. We needed a bus and hotel rooms for 2 nights. It was a standard expense, pre-approved in the budget at the start of the year. On Wednesday, the rejection email came. From District Finance to Julia Foster. Subject, travel request. Denied Ms. Foster. Due to unforeseen reallocations in the extracurricular discretionary fund, we are unable to approve travel expenses for the state debate tournament at this time. We encourage you to seek alternative local opportunities. I stared at the screen. Unforeseen reallocations. I marched down to the main office. I didn't care about the warning. I didn't care about Marin's advice. I need to speak to Vance. I told the secretary, "He is in a meeting," she said, not looking up. "I will wait." I said, I waited for an hour. When he finally emerged, he looked surprised to see me, then annoyed. "Julia, I don't have time for a drop-in," he said. "You cut the debate funding." I said, my voice was steady, but my knees were shaking. Those kids worked for 6 months to qualify. The money was in the budget in September. Priorities change, Vance said, stepping around me. We had to move some funds to cover operational shortfalls. "What shortfalls?" I asked. "The facility consulting fees?" Vance stopped. He turned slowly to face me. The hallway was crowded with students changing classes. But for a second, it felt like we were the only 2 people in the world. "Be very careful." "Julia," he said softly, "you are dangerously close to insubordination. The decision is final. There is no money." He walked away. I had to tell the kids that afternoon. Seeing the light go out of Tessa's eyes was worse than the reprimand. It was worse than the fear. It was a physical blow. "It's okay, Ms. Foster," she said quietly, packing her notes into her backpack. "We know how it works. We're Harbor Glen. We don't get the nice things." That night, I stayed at school late. I couldn't bear to go home to the empty apartment. I was grading papers in the silence when the janitor, Mr. Hernandez, knocked on the door. "Ms. Foster? There is a parent here. Says he needs to grab his kid's jacket from the lost and found. But he wanted to say hello." I looked up. "Who is it?" "Mr. Giamatti, Leo's dad." Leo was a quiet kid in my second period. I nodded. "Send him in." Mr. Giamatti was a short, stout man with calloused hands and eyes that looked like they had seen too much paperwork. He worked for the city permit office. "Ms. Foster," he said, twisting a baseball cap in his hands. "I heard about the debate trip. That's a raw deal." "It is." I said, "I am sorry Leo is disappointed." "Yeah, well," he looked at the door, then stepped closer to my desk. "Look, I shouldn't be saying this, but I see things downtown." I put my pen down. "What kind of things?" "Bright Steps," he said. "The foundation. They have been fast-tracking permits like I have never seen. They are applying for zoning variances for these learning hubs." "What is a learning hub?" I asked. "That is what I asked," he said. "On the application, it says Educational Support Centers, but I looked at the blueprints. Ms. Foster, these aren't classrooms. They are mixed-use developments. Retail on the bottom, luxury condos on top, with a small community room in the back to justify the tax break." He leaned in. "They are using the school grant status to bypass the commercial zoning fees. They are building real estate empires on land meant for kids, and the city is rubber stamping it because the school board says it is critical infrastructure." I felt a chill run down my spine. It matched the spreadsheet. Site readiness, real estate. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you are the only one who seems to give a damn about these kids," he said, "and because I don't like being played." He put his cap back on. "I never said this. I never heard it." I said, 2 days later. The envelope appeared. It was in my mailbox at my apartment complex. No return address. Just my name, printed in block letters. I carried it upstairs. My hands trembling, I locked the door, engaged the deadbolt, and closed the blinds before I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was another spreadsheet, but this one looked different. It was older, and across the top, in jagged, hurried handwriting, someone had written, "The grants are a cover, follow the leases." I looked at the highlighted rows. Lessor, Bright Future Holdings. Lessee, Harbor Glen Independent School District. Property, 1200 Elm Street. Temporary instructional space. Monthly rent, $12,000. I knew Elm Street. It was a rundown strip of warehouses near the port. $12,000 a month? You could rent a mansion for that. I couldn't use my school computer. They were watching. I couldn't use my home Wi-Fi. I didn't know how deep this went. On Saturday morning, I drove to the public library 3 towns over. I wore a baseball cap and sunglasses, feeling ridiculous. But the fear was a constant hum in my blood now. I found a terminal in the back corner. I logged on as a guest. I started searching property records for Bright Future Holdings. It was a shell game. Bright Future Holdings was owned by BSL. Management, BSL, presumably stood for Bright Steps Learning. I looked up the deed for 1200 Elm Street. Bright Steps had purchased the building 3 years ago for $200,000. I did the math. The school district was paying them $144,000 a year in rent for a building that cost $200,000 total. In 2 years, the district had paid for the building and then some, and the building sat empty. I drove past it on my way to work sometimes. It was boarded up. There were other leases, a storefront on Main Street, a warehouse on the west side, all owned by Bright Steps entities, all leased back to the district for instructional space at 3 or 4 times the market rate. They weren't just laundering money through construction, they were draining the district's operating budget, the money for books, for buses, for teachers, into their own pockets through rent payments on empty buildings. I printed the pages. The printer hissed and whirred, the sound loud in the quiet library. I shoved the papers into my bag and walked out. Checking over my shoulder, my phone rang as I got into my car. It was my mother, Julia. She said, her voice was ice. "Hello. Mom, you missed the brunch," she said. "The Charity League brunch. I told you about it 3 weeks ago. Mrs. Henderson was asking where you were. It was incredibly embarrassing." I closed my eyes, leaning my head against the steering wheel. "Mom, I am sorry. I completely forgot. I have been dealing with a lot at work. Always the work." She sighed. "Your father is furious. We try to include you." "Julia, we try to help you maintain some social standing, but you just don't seem to care." "It's not that I don't care," I said, my voice cracking. "It's that, Mom, something is happening, something bad. I think people at the district are stealing money." There was a pause. Then my father's voice came on the line. He must have been listening on speaker. "Stop it, Julia. Dad, stop with the conspiracy theories," he snapped. "You missed a brunch because you are disorganized, not because you are investigating a crime. You are a teacher, not a detective. Dad, I have proof." I said, "The leases." "I don't want to hear it," he shouted. "God, Julia, you are creating drama because you can't compete. You see Caleb succeeding. You see your friends moving up, and you are stuck in that dead-end school. So you invent these stories to make yourself feel important. It is pathetic." The line went dead. I sat there in the parking lot of the library, the phone still pressed to my ear. Pathetic. The word hung in the air. I looked at the stack of papers on the passenger seat, the evidence of millions of dollars in theft, and my own father thought I was making it up for attention. The isolation was complete. I had no allies at work. I had no support at home. On Monday, the district announced a new initiative, employee wellness check-ins. The email said it was a proactive measure to support staff mental health during these challenging times. Randomly selected staff members would be required to attend a session with a district-contracted counselor. I wasn't surprised when my name was on the first list. The counselor's office was in the administrative building. The room was beige. The counselor was a man with a soft voice and eyes that watched me like a hawk. "So, Julia, he said, looking at a file on his lap. Principal Vance tells me you have been seeming a bit erratic lately. Erratic? I said. Yes, intense, fixated. Have you been sleeping? I sleep fine. I lied. He made a note. And your personal life? I understand you are unmarried, living alone. That can be isolating. Do you ever feel like people are against you? Like you are being persecuted? I stared at him. I realized what this was. He wasn't checking on my wellness. He was building a profile. If I blew the whistle, they would pull out this file. Paranoid, delusional, disgruntled. I feel fine, I said, standing up. I am just passionate about my job. Is that a disorder now? I walked out before he could answer. I went straight to my car. I didn't go back to class. I drove to the electronics store on the highway. I bought a 1 terabyte external hard drive and a burner phone. I paid cash. I went home and pulled the shades. I took every piece of paper I had collected, the emails, the spreadsheets, the lease records from the library, the note from the mailbox. I scanned them all. I organized them by date. I created a digital timeline. Folder, evidence. Subfolder, apex. Subfolder, leases. Subfolder, intimidation. My hands were steady now. The fear was still there, but it had changed. It wasn't the trembling, paralyzing fear of the victim. It was the cold, hard fear of the witness. I looked at the glowing blue folder on my screen. My father said I was creating drama. Principal Vance said I was expendable. Marin said I would be erased. I clicked save. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I didn't want to be a hero. Heroes usually ended up dead or ruined. I was just trying to make sure that when they finally came for me, and I knew they were coming, I would not disappear without a trace. The envelope was waiting in my faculty mailbox on a Tuesday morning, sandwiched between a catalog for educational software and a flyer for a discount car wash. It was thick, heavy, and stamped with the official seal of the Harbor Glen Independent School District. I knew before I opened it that it was the end of the world. I carried it to my classroom, my hands trembling so violently that I dropped my keys twice while trying to unlock the door. I sat at my desk, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, and slid the envelope open with a letter opener. Notice of formal investigation. The words seemed to float on the page, detached from the paper. Dear Ms. Foster, this letter is to inform you that the District Office of Human Resources has opened an investigation into allegations regarding professional boundary concerns and the violation of Board Policy DGA regarding political neutrality in the classroom. A complaint has been filed stating that you have used your position to pressure students into adopting specific political opinions and have created a hostile learning environment for those with differing views. I stopped reading. My breath hitched in my throat. Pressuring students? I taught debate. The entire point of the class was to argue multiple sides of an issue. We researched tax policy, infrastructure, foreign aid. I forced students to argue against their own beliefs as a mental exercise. I read on. Pending the conclusion of this investigation, your teaching license is under review by the State Credentialing Board. You are advised to secure union representation. It was a kill shot. They weren't just trying to fire me. They were trying to revoke my license. They were trying to make sure I never taught again. I sat there for a long time, staring at the dust motes dancing in the shaft of light coming through the window. It was a vague, shapeless accusation. Professional boundary concerns. It was designed to sound sinister without saying anything specific. It was the kind of charge that stuck to you like tar, no matter how hard you scrubbed. During fourth period, my debate class, I moved like a ghost. I handed out worksheets on logical fallacies, my voice sounding hollow and distant to my own ears. I avoided making eye contact with the students, terrified that even a look could be construed as pressure. When the bell rang, Tessa Lang stayed behind. Tessa was my best debater. She was a scholarship kid, sharp as a tack, with a skepticism that matched my own. Usually, she stayed to talk about college applications or the news. Today, she stood by my desk, twisting the strap of her backpack. "Ms. Foster?" she said. Her voice was small. I looked up, forcing a smile. "Hey, Tessa, what is up?" She looked at the door, checking to make sure the hallway was empty. Then she stepped closer. "I need to tell you something," she said. "I have felt bad about it for days." My stomach turned over. "What is it?" "You know the gala?" she asked. "The Bright Steps one? Where we had to stand on stage?" I nodded. "After the photos, this man came up to me," she said. "He was wearing a nice suit. He gave me a business card and told me I was very articulate." I waited, my pulse thumping in my ears. "He started asking me questions about you," Tessa said. "He asked if you ever talked about the school board. He asked if you ever complained about the administration. He asked what you talk about after school." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What did you tell him?" I whispered. "I said you talk about debate," Tessa said quickly. "I said you help us with our research, but he kept pushing. He asked if you ever made us feel like we had to agree with you. He asked if you ever seemed unstable." She looked down at her sneakers. I didn't know what to say. "Ms. Foster." I just wanted to leave, but he made it sound like he was concerned, like he was trying to help you. I reached out and gripped the edge of my desk. They were interviewing my students. They were mining teenage confusion for ammunition. "Who was he?" I asked. "Did you catch his name?" "No," Tessa said, "but he had a pin on his lapel. The Bright Steps logo. It is okay." "Tessa," I said, though nothing was okay. "You did nothing wrong. Thank you for telling me." She left, and I was alone in the silence. It wasn't just the administration anymore. It wasn't just the finance office. They were weaponizing my classroom. They were turning the sanctuary I had built for these kids into an interrogation room. I stopped eating lunch that day. The thought of food made my throat close up. Over the next week, the paranoia set in. It wasn't a frantic, movie-style panic. It was a low, constant hum, like the sound of a refrigerator you couldn't unplug. I started sleeping in 20-minute bursts, waking up with my heart racing. Convinced I had heard a noise at the door, I walked the hallways with my eyes on the floor. When I passed the faculty lounge and heard laughter, I assumed it was about me. When the principal walked by and didn't look at me, I assumed he was planning the date of my execution. I needed help. I needed someone outside the system. On Thursday afternoon, I drove to the office of the Harbor Glen Ledger. It was a small, brick building downtown, squeezed between a dry cleaner and a bakery. The Ledger was a weekly paper, mostly known for covering high school football and the mayor's ribbon-cutting ceremonies. I walked in. The front desk was empty. A bell on the counter dinged when I pushed it. A man came out from the back. He looked about 60, with ink-stained fingers and a shirt that had seen better days. His name was Arthur. I knew him because he had interviewed the debate team 2 years ago when we won districts. "Ms. Foster," he said, looking surprised. "What brings you here? Did the team win another trophy?" "Can we talk?" I asked. "Privately?" He looked at my face, the dark circles under my eyes, the tension in my jaw, and his expression sobered. "Come on back." His office was a cluttered mess of papers and old coffee cups. I sat down and told him everything. I told him about the spreadsheet, the leases, the empty buildings, the threat to my license. I talked for 20 minutes without stopping. When I finished, I sat back, waiting for him to grab his notepad, to call a photographer, to get angry. Arthur just sighed. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Julia," he said, "you are a good woman, and I have no doubt that what you are saying is true." "So you will print it?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "I can't." "Why not?" I demanded. "This is the biggest story in town. This is millions of dollars in taxpayer money." Arthur picked up a copy of the latest edition of the Ledger from his desk. He flipped it over to the back page. It was a full-page color advertisement for the Bright Steps Learning Foundation, Partners in Excellence. The tagline read, "They buy the back page every week," Arthur said, "and the inside cover, and they sponsor our community calendar. Julia, print journalism is dying. Bright Steps accounts for 30% of my operating revenue. If I run a story accusing them of fraud, they pull the ads. I can't make payroll. But it is the truth. I said, it is expensive truth. He said, and they have lawyers. Julia, vicious ones. 5 years ago, a blogger tried to look into their land deals. They sued him for defamation, kept him in court for 3 years. He lost his house paying the legal fees. I can't do that to this paper. I can't do that to my staff. He looked at me with genuine pity. Let it go. For your own sake. These people don't play by the rules. They make the rules. I walked out of the newspaper office feeling like I had been punched in the stomach. The Fourth Estate had failed. The watchdog was fed and muzzled. I drove to the grocery store on my way home because I had run out of coffee. And coffee was the only thing keeping me upright. It was 8 o'clock at night. The aisles were mostly empty. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I was standing in the cereal aisle, staring blankly at a box of bran flakes, when a man walked up next to me. He didn't look like he belonged in Harbor Glen. He was wearing a faded leather jacket, jeans, and boots that looked expensive but worn. He had a days-old beard and eyes that were scanning the shelves with a kind of restless intensity. "Excuse me," he said. I jumped, dropping the cereal box. "I'm sorry," I stammered, bending down to pick it up. He crouched down with me and handed me the box. His hand brushed mine. His grip was firm. "You are Julia Foster, right?" he asked quietly. I froze. I stood up slowly, clutching the cereal to my chest like a shield. "Who are you?" "My name is Nolan Reeve," he said. He didn't smile. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a credential. It was a press pass. Nightline Verdict. I stared at it. That was a national show. An investigative powerhouse. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I am in town for a piece on the opioid crisis," Nolan said, "but I have a habit of listening to bartenders. And last night, a guy at the tap room, guy who works for the city permitting office, got a little drunk and started talking about a teacher who was getting crushed by the machine. Mr. Giamatti, I thought, I don't know what you're talking about," I said, backing away. "I am just a teacher." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I know about the investigation. Julia, I know about the boundary concerns. That is the classic play. Discredit the source before the source can speak. Leave me alone." I said, "I am not here to save you," Nolan said, and the bluntness of it made me stop. "I am a producer. I tell stories, and it sounds like you are sitting on a hell of a story. But if you try to fight them alone in a town they own, you are going to lose. You are going to lose your job, your license, and your reputation." "And what?" I snapped. "You want to put me on TV so I can lose it all faster? I want to put you on the record," he said. "Sunlight is the only disinfectant that works on mold this deep. If you go national, they can't bury you in a quiet room. The whole country watches. It makes you dangerous to touch. It makes me a target." I said, "You are already a target." Nolan said, "Look at you. You are shaking in the cereal aisle. You are not sleeping. You are scared to answer your phone. They already have you in the crosshairs. Julia, the only question is whether you shoot back." I shook my head. "I can't. My parents, my students, I can't be a headline." He pulled a card from his pocket and tucked it into the cereal box I was holding. "If you change your mind, call me. I am at the Holiday Inn by the highway, room 212. I am leaving on Sunday." He turned and walked away, disappearing toward the frozen foods. I drove home and threw the card in the trash. I told myself I wouldn't do it. I told myself I could handle it. I would hire a lawyer. I would fight the investigation. I would survive. The next morning, the second blow landed. I walked into the main office to check my mailbox, praying there were no more certified letters. There was a memo. To Julia Foster, debate sponsor. From District Finance. Subject, program budget adjustment effective immediately. The remaining operating budget for the Harbor Glen debate program has been rescinded due to district-wide austerity measures. All future meets, including local invitationals, are canceled. No bus requisitions will be approved. I stared at the paper, They weren't just cutting travel now. They were cutting the program. They were killing it. I went to my classroom. My first period students were filing in. I looked at their faces. They were good kids. They worked hard. They didn't have much. The debate team was the only thing some of them had on their college applications that made them stand out. And it was gone, because of me. Because I had looked. I realized then that my silence wasn't protecting them. My silence was the weapon the district was using to hurt them. By trying to stay quiet, I was letting the district punish the students to get to me. I taught the class on autopilot. At lunch, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Julia," she chirped. Her voice was breathless, excited. "You will never guess what came in the mail today." I rubbed my temples. "What, Mom?" "An invitation," she said, "to the Bright Steps Platinum Gala, the one at the country club. It is $500 a plate. Julia, but we have been comped. VIP table." I felt a cold, sick feeling in my stomach. Why? Why would they invite you? "Because of your father's standing in the community." "Obviously," she said. "And, well, the note said they are looking to strengthen ties with the families of their educators. It is a huge honor. Everyone who is anyone will be there." "Mom, you can't go," I said. "Excuse me?" "They are doing this to get to me," I said. "It is a bribe, Mom, or a threat. I don't know which. But you can't go. These people are corrupt." "Oh, stop it," she snapped. The excitement vanished from her voice, replaced by the familiar disappointment. "Why do you always have to ruin everything? You are so jealous. Julia, you can't stand that we are being recognized. You want everyone to be as miserable as you are." "They are using you," I cried. "They are honoring us," she yelled back. "And we are going. And if you had any respect for this family, you would be happy for us." She hung up. I sat there, looking at the dead phone. They had bought my parents for the price of a dinner. They knew exactly where to push. They knew my father's desperate need for validation. My mother's hunger for social status. They were isolating me completely, turning my own family into collateral. I went home that night feeling like I was walking underwater. I unlocked my apartment door. The key stuck a little, which was odd. It usually turned smoothly. I jiggled it, and the door swung open. I stepped inside. The air felt different, disturbed. I turned on the light. The living room looked normal. The TV was there. The couch was there. But the rug was crooked, just slightly. I walked into the bedroom. My heart was pounding. I knelt down and looked under the bed. My file box, the plastic bin where I kept my tax returns and the older documents, was there. But it was pulled out about 3 inches. I always pushed it all the way to the wall. I pulled it out. The lid was unlatched. I rifled through it. Nothing seemed to be missing, but the order was wrong. My 2021 returns were on top of 2022. I stood up and looked at my desk. My laptop was sitting there, but it was angled toward the window. I always left it parallel to the edge of the desk. I opened it. It asked for my password. I didn't type it in. I closed the lid. They hadn't taken anything. They hadn't smashed anything. They had just come in. They had touched my things. They had moved them just enough to let me know. "We can get in. You are not safe. Nowhere is safe." I backed out of the bedroom. I backed out of the apartment. I ran down the stairs to my car. I locked the doors and sat there, hyperventilating. They were in my head. They were in my classroom. They were in my parents' social calendar. And now they were in my bedroom. I reached into the trash bag I kept on the passenger floorboard for wrappers. I dug through the empty coffee cups and receipts until I found the cereal box. I pulled out the card, Nolan Reeve, Nightline Verdict. I drove to the Holiday Inn. I didn't call first. I was afraid if I used my phone, they would know. I went up to room 212. I knocked. Nolan opened the door. He was wearing a t-shirt and holding a toothbrush. He looked at me. My wild hair, my pale face, the sheer terror in my eyes. He didn't say "I told you so." He just stepped back and held the door open. "Come in," he said. I walked into the hotel room. It smelled of stale air conditioning and travel. There was a laptop open on the desk, surrounded by notes. I sat down on the edge of the bed. I was still clutching my purse, which contained the flash drive and the timeline I had made. They broke into my apartment. I said, my voice was flat. Nolan nodded. He spit out his toothpaste in the bathroom sink and came back. Wiping his mouth, did they take anything? No. I said, they just moved things, to show me they could. Psychological warfare, Nolan said. Standard operating procedure. They want you to feel insane. They want you to doubt your own memory. My parents are going to their gala. I said, my debate team is canceled. I am under investigation for pressuring students. I looked up at him. I am losing. Nolan, I am losing everything, and I haven't even fought back yet. Nolan sat in the desk chair, turning it to face me. So what do you want to do? He asked. I reached into my purse. I pulled out the folder. Inside were the printouts of the leases, the spreadsheet from the finance office, the timeline of intimidation, the notes from my conversation with Tessa. I held it out to him. I want to burn it down. I said. Nolan took the folder. He opened it and started scanning the pages. His eyebrows went up. He saw the lease numbers. He saw the shell companies. This is good. Julia, he said quietly, this is receipts. We can verify this. We can trace the LLCs. He looked at me. But you need to understand. Once we start this, there is no going back. If we put you on camera, if we air this, you will never teach in this district again. You might never teach anywhere again. Half the town will hate you. Your parents might never forgive you. I know. I said, I thought about my father, sitting at that gala, desperate to belong. I thought about Marin Pike, eating her salad in fear. I thought of Tessa Lang, being interrogated by a man in a suit. They don't even need to prove I'm wrong. I said, the realization crystallizing in my mind like ice. They just need to make me look crazy. That is their whole strategy. If I am the crazy lady, the facts don't matter. Nolan nodded. Exactly. So I have to be sane. I said, I have to be the sanest person in the room, and I have to say it loud enough that they can't pretend they didn't hear it. I stood up. When do we start? Nolan closed the folder. He looked at me with a new kind of respect. Tomorrow morning, he said. We start verifying the paper trail. But Julia? Yes? Get a deadbolt for your door that they can't pick, and don't go anywhere alone. I walked to the door. I am not alone anymore. I said. I walked out into the hallway. The fear was still there, pounding in my chest. But for the first time in weeks, it wasn't just fear, it was fuel. I was going to lose my job. I was going to lose my parents' approval. I was probably going to lose my career, but I wasn't going to let them erase me. The email arrived at 10 o'clock in the morning, while I was in the middle of a lesson on the Articles of Confederation. The notification popped up on the smartboard, projected for the entire class to see. Before I could freeze the screen. Urgent. Personnel action. Mandatory meeting. The class went silent. 30 teenagers stared at the board, then at me. I froze the screen, my heart thudding a heavy, irregular rhythm against my ribs. I turned back to them. Read the next section. I said. My voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. I will be right back. Principal Vance was waiting for me in the hallway. He wasn't alone, a district security officer. A man I had seen patrolling the parking lot stood with his arms crossed behind him. Julia. Vance said, We need to go to my office. Now? I asked. I have a class. Coverage has been arranged. Vance said. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked at a spot somewhere over my left shoulder. The walk to the office felt like a funeral procession. The security guard walked 3 paces behind me. Students were changing classes for the intervention block, and the hallway was a river of noise and movement. I felt like I was floating through them, invisible and marked at the same time. In the office, Vance didn't offer me a seat. He handed me a letter, effective immediately. You are placed on administrative leave with pay. Pending the outcome of the investigation into professional misconduct, he said. He sounded like he was reading a script. You are to surrender your keys and your district laptop. You are not to contact students, parents, or staff members. You are not to step foot on district property without express written authorization. I stared at the letter, The word swam. Administrative leave. It sounded bureaucratic and clean. In reality, it was a banishment. "I need to get my purse," I said. "And my personal things. Officer Davis will escort you." Vance said, "You have 10 minutes to collect your personal effects. Do not speak to the students." The walk back to my classroom was the longest of my life. The substitute was already there. I had to walk in, with the security guard hovering in the doorway, and pack my bag while my students watched. "Ms. Foster?" Tessa asked. She started to stand up. I held up a hand. "Sit down. Tessa, please." I swept my personal books, my coffee mug, and the framed photo of my grandmother into a cardboard box the guard provided. I didn't look at the kids. I couldn't. If I looked at them, I would cry, and I refused to give Vance the satisfaction of seeing me break. I walked out of the school carrying the box. It was raining. A gray drizzle that soaked through my cardigan before I even reached my car. I put the box in the passenger seat and sat there, gripping the steering wheel. My phone buzzed. It wasn't a text from a colleague asking if I was okay. It was a notification from the district app. Access denied. They had cut off my email before I had even left the parking lot. By that evening, the whispers had started. I could feel them spreading through the town like a virus. I went to the grocery store to buy wine, cheap red wine, because I needed to numb the sharp edges of the day, and I ran into Mrs. Gable, the mother of a sophomore. She saw me. Her eyes widened, and she immediately turned her cart down the detergent aisle to avoid me. She did something, that was the phrase. It was vague enough to be anything and dark enough to be everything. "Did you hear about Ms. Foster? She was escorted out. They say it's bad. Professional boundaries." When I got back to my apartment, my mother called. I stared at the screen. Eleanor Foster. I picked up, hoping, stupidly, that she had heard, that she was calling to ask if I was all right. "Julia," she said. Her voice was tight, vibrating with suppressed anger. "Hello, Mom. I just got off the phone with Helen Vance. She said, 'The principal's wife. We are on the garden committee together.'" I closed my eyes. "Of course. She tells me you were removed from the school today," my mother said, "escorted out by security. Julia, do you have any idea what this looks like?" "It looks like retaliation." I said, "It looks like a scandal." She snapped. "Your brother's engagement party is in 3 days. We have family coming in from Chicago. We have business associates. And now I have to explain why my daughter is suspended? I am not suspended." I said, though the distinction felt meaningless, "I am on leave. They are trying to silence me because I found—" "Stop it." She cut me off. "I do not want to hear your stories. I want you to pull yourself together. You are embarrassing this family. Julia, you are making us look like low-class drama mongers." I heard a voice in the background. My father. "She has always been sensitive. Eleanor, I told you, she cracks under pressure." The words hit me harder than the security guard. Sensitive. It was the way they dismissed my entire existence, my moral compass, my empathy, my refusal to look away, to them. It was just a flaw in my wiring, a weakness. I hung up the phone. I didn't say goodbye. I just pressed the red button and severed the connection. I poured the wine down the sink. I didn't want to be numb. I wanted to be sharp. I drove to the Holiday Inn. Nolan had turned room 212 into a war room. The beds were pushed against the wall. A whiteboard he must have bought at an office supply store was propped up on the dresser. It was covered in names and lines drawn in red marker. When I walked in, he didn't ask how I was. He looked at my face, saw the set of my jaw, and nodded. "They locked you out?" he asked. "This morning." I said, "Security escort? Good." Nolan said, "Good?" I stared at him. "It means they are panicking," he said. "If they thought you were nothing, they would have ignored you. You don't deploy security for a nuisance. You deploy them for a threat. Come look at this." He pointed to the whiteboard. "My team in New York ran the LLCs you found," he said. "You were right. Apex Strategies is a shell, but we found where the money goes after Apex." He tapped a box labeled consulting fees. Apex pays retainers to a firm called River City Solutions. He said, River City Solutions has one employee, a man named David Thorne. I don't know that name. I said, you wouldn't. Nolan said, he is a strategic advisor. But look who he advises. He drew a line from David Thorne to Councilman Miller. Miller is the chair of the zoning committee. Nolan said, the committee that approves the variances for the learning hubs. I stared at the board. The circle was complete. The school district paid Apex. Apex paid Thorne. Thorne paid, or advised, the councilman. And the councilman approved the permits that let Bright Steps build luxury condos on educational land. It is a machine, I whispered. It is a municipal laundering operation. Nolan corrected, and we can prove the money flow. We have the bank records for Apex. They got sloppy. Julia, they transferred $50,000 to Thorne 2 days before the zoning vote last month. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. I pulled it out. It wasn't a call. It was an email to my personal account. From Legal Department, Bright Steps Foundation. Subject, cease and desist / notice of legal action. I opened it. The text was dense, aggressive, and terrifying. Dear Ms. Foster, it has come to our attention that you are in possession of proprietary and confidential materials belonging to the Bright Steps Learning Foundation and the Harbor Glen Independent School District. Furthermore, we have evidence that you have been disseminating false and defamatory statements regarding our organization to third parties. You are hereby ordered to cease and desist all such communications immediately. You are further ordered to return all proprietary materials. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action, including but not limited to a civil suit for damages in excess of $5 million and potential criminal referral for theft of trade secrets. I handed the phone to Nolan. My hand was shaking. $5 million. I said. Nolan read it. He didn't blink. Standard intimidation. He said, they are trying to scare you into silence before we go to air. It is working. I said, I don't have $5 million. Nolan, I have $400 and a leased Honda. They don't want your money, he said. They want your fear. They want you to call me right now and say, I'm out. He looked at me. Are you out? I looked at the whiteboard. I looked at the line connecting the school budget to the zoning committee. That was money for textbooks. That was money for the debate team. That was Tessa Lang's future, being funneled into a councilman's pocket. No, I said, I am not out, but I needed allies. I needed Maren. I tried calling her the next day. She didn't answer. I texted her, please, Maren, I just need to talk. No reply. Finally, I drove to her house. I parked down the street and waited. When she pulled into her driveway, I got out and walked over. She saw me and froze. She looked around the street, terrified. Julia, you can't be here, she hissed. Maren, they put me on leave. I said, they are trying to sue me. I need you to tell them what you know. You know about the budget cuts. You know about the pressure. Maren started to cry. It was a horrible, silent weeping. I can't, she sobbed. Why not? I asked. Maren, it is right. They called me in, she whispered. Vance and that woman from HR. They told me that if I was found to be complicit in your disruptive behavior, they would transfer me to the alternative school in the warehouse district. So? I said. It is a job. It is an hour commute. Maren said. Julia, I have shared custody of Leo. If I have that commute, I can't make the pickup times. My ex-husband, he has been looking for a reason to petition for full custody. He would win. She looked at me, her eyes red and pleading. They told me I would lose my son. Julia, not in those words, but that is what they meant. I can't lose Leo. I won't. She turned and ran into her house. I stood in the driveway, feeling the cold seep into my bones. They weren't just threatening careers. They were threatening families. They had found the one thing Maren loved more than her integrity, and they had put a knife to its throat. I realized then that I was truly alone. Maren was a good person, but she was a mother first. I couldn't blame her, and that made me hate them even more. Saturday was the engagement party. I shouldn't have gone. Every instinct screamed at me to stay in my apartment with the deadbolt thrown, but I was still a Foster. The obligation was hardwired into me, and a small, stubborn part of me refused to hide. If I didn't go, it was an admission of guilt. The party was at the yacht club, a white-columned building overlooking the harbor. It was packed with people drinking champagne and eating crab cakes. I wore the same black dress I had worn to the gala, but I felt like I was wearing a scarlet letter. When I walked in, the conversation in the entryway lulled. My Aunt Linda, a woman who wore pearls like armor, looked me up and down. "Julia," she said, "we didn't think you would come." Considering what?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Well," she lowered her voice to a stage whisper, "considering the trouble. Your mother says you are having a breakdown, that the stress of the job was too much." A breakdown. That was the narrative. Not a whistleblower, a hysteric. "I am not having a breakdown." "Linda," I said, "I am having a moral objection." She laughed, a brittle, tinkling sound. "Oh, Julia, always so dramatic, just like when you were a teenager." I made my way to the bar. I saw my brother, Caleb, across the room. He looked happy, glowing with success. He was talking to a man in a navy suit. I squinted. The man in the navy suit was the president of the school board. I felt the room tilt. They were all connected. My family, the board, the foundation. It was one big, incestuous knot of influence. I walked over to Caleb. "Hey," I said. He turned. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned, fixed and polite. "Jules, you made it." He hugged me, but it was stiff. He pulled away quickly. "This is Mr. Henderson," he said, gesturing to the board president. "We have met," Henderson said. He smiled, and his eyes were cold, dead sharks. "Good to see you resting, Ms. Foster. The district takes mental health very seriously." I looked at him. I looked at my brother, who was nodding along, oblivious or willfully blind. "I am not resting." I said clearly, "I am waiting." Henderson's smile didn't waver. "Waiting is a dangerous game, Ms. Foster. Sometimes you wait too long, and the opportunity for a graceful exit passes." I turned and walked out. I didn't say goodbye to my parents. I couldn't breathe in there. The air smelled of expensive perfume and complicity. On Monday, I tried to log into the state certification portal to check the status of my license. I still had my personal login. I navigated to my file. I wanted to see if the investigation had been formally flagged yet. It had. But there was something else. I looked at the section labeled Professional Development. There were 3 entries flagged in red: missed mandatory training, youth mental health first aid, missed mandatory training, ethics in education, missed mandatory training, data privacy. I stared at the screen. I had attended those trainings. I had the certificates in my file box. I remembered the ethics training specifically. It was in the cafeteria. And the coffee had been terrible. They had altered the record. They went into the database and deleted my attendance. They were building a paper trail of incompetence. She misses training. She ignores protocol. She is unprofessional. I took a screenshot. My hand was shaking. If they could rewrite the past, how could I prove the present? I called Nolan. "They are changing my file." I said, "They are deleting my history." "We need to move," Nolan said. "We can't wait for the rest of the bank records. We have enough." He paused. "Julia, I want to do an interview, on camera, this week." I hesitated. I thought about the CD letter. I thought about the $5 million, but then I thought about Marin crying in her driveway. I thought about my father calling me sensitive while selling me out. "Okay," I said. But I have conditions. Name them. My students." I said, "No names. No footage of the school that shows their faces. No interviewing them to get emotional reactions. This isn't about their trauma. It is about the money." "Done," Nolan said. "And one more thing." I said, "We do it live." Nolan went silent. Live? Julia, that is high risk. If you freeze, if you stumble, if we tape it, I said, their lawyers will get an injunction before it airs. They will bury the footage. If it is live, they can't stop it. Once it is out, it is out. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear Nolan thinking. You are right, he said finally. It is risky as hell. But you are right. We set it for Friday, on Wednesday, 2 days before the broadcast. Nolan called me. His voice was tight. We got a tip, he said. From who? Anonymous. Came in through the encrypted line. He calls himself Mason. What did he say? He said he used to be an accountant for Bright Steps. He said he has the original ledger, the one that shows the kickbacks labeled as donor cultivation expenses. My heart leapt. That is the smoking gun. Nolan, I know, Nolan said. But that is not all, he said. He sent a message for you. For me? He said, I can prove the board knew, but I am running out of time. What does that mean? I asked. Running out of time? It means he is scared. Nolan said, it means they know he has it. We are trying to bring him in. Julia, but he is ghosting us. The stakes had just gone up. It wasn't just fraud anymore. It was danger. Real, physical danger. Thursday morning, the final offer came. It was an email from the district's general counsel. It was marked Confidential Settlement Proposal. Dear Ms. Foster, in the interest of resolving the current personnel dispute without prolonged litigation, the district is prepared to offer the following terms. 1. Immediate voluntary resignation. 2. A neutral letter of reference. 3. A settlement payment of $50,000. 4. Execution of a strict non-disclosure agreement regarding all district operations and internal data. This offer expires in 24 hours. I looked at the number. $50,000. It was more money than I made in a year. It was enough to move, enough to start over, enough to fix my car and pay my rent for 2 years. All I had to do was sign. All I had to do was disappear. I sat at my kitchen table, the contract glowing on the screen. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. I was tired. I was scared. I wanted my life back. But then I looked at the file box on my floor. I looked at the timeline. If I signed, Marin would still be trapped. Tessa Lang's school would still be turned into condos. The councilman would still get his kickbacks. They weren't offering me money because I was wrong. They were offering me money because I was right. They were afraid. The $50,000 wasn't a settlement. It was hush money. I hit reply. I didn't write a long letter. I didn't write a manifesto. I typed 2 words. Offer declined. I hit send. Then I turned off my phone, went into my bedroom, and packed a bag. I wasn't going to stay in the apartment tonight. I was going to the studio, and I was going to burn their house down. The silence that followed my refusal of the district's settlement offer lasted exactly 42 minutes. I sat at the small desk in the hotel room, watching the minutes tick by on the bedside clock. I had expected a phone call. I had expected screaming. I had expected a lawyer to bang on the door. Instead, my phone buzzed with a notification from the state licensure board. Notice of emergency credential review hearing. I opened the email. The hearing was scheduled for Monday morning at 9 o'clock. The cause listed was gross professional misconduct and moral turpitude. Moral turpitude. It was a legal term, heavy and archaic, designed to sound dirty. It implied that I hadn't just broken a rule. I had broken a commandment. 10 minutes later, the second wave hit. My phone started vibrating incessantly, dancing across the laminate desktop. It was not the district this time. It was Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You have been tagged in a post by concerned parents of Harbor Glen. You have been tagged in a post by Harbor Glen Community Watch. I shouldn't have looked. Nolan had told me not to look, but the compulsion to see the blast radius of your own life is overwhelming. I opened the local parent forum. There was a photo of me. It was from 3 years ago, taken at a field day. I was wearing shorts and a tank top, holding a water balloon, laughing. It was innocent, but the caption beneath it was not. Alert. Sources confirmed that the teacher removed from Harbor Glen High yesterday is under investigation for pushing radical political agendas on our children and misappropriating student funds for personal travel. The district is finally taking action to protect our kids from unstable influence. Why did it take so long? #ProtectOurKids. #HarborGlenStrong. The comments were scrolling faster than I could read them. I always knew something was off about her. My son said she talks about politics constantly. She shouldn't be allowed near children. Is she the one who lives in those apartments on the south side? Someone should go check on her stability. I dropped the phone as if it were burning hot. They weren't just firing me, they were salting the earth. They were leaking a distorted version of the truth. The misappropriated funds was clearly a twist on the debate travel budget, to inoculate the public against whatever I might say later. If I spoke up now, I wouldn't be a whistleblower. I would be a disgruntled, unstable ex-employee trying to deflect from her own crimes. Nolan walked in from the adjoining room. He saw my face. He saw the phone on the floor. "I told you," he said gently. "Don't read the comments. The comments are not the jury. They are destroying me." "Nolan," I said. My voice was thin. "They are taking my reputation, my history, my name, and they are feeding it to the wolves. That is the point," Nolan said. He picked up my phone and turned it off. "They want you to break. They want you to call them begging to sign that NDA just to make the noise stop." He sat down opposite me, but we have something louder than a Facebook comment thread. He placed a digital recorder on the table. "We got Mason." He said. I sat up straighter. "The accountant?" "He wouldn't meet in person." Nolan said, "He is terrified. He thinks he is being followed, but he agreed to a drop. He left a burner phone in a locker at the bus station." There was one voice memo on it. Nolan pressed play. The voice was distorted, raspy and metallic, but the fear underneath it was palpable. "You are looking at the leases, but you are looking at it wrong. You think it is about the rent. It is not about the rent. The rent is just the sweetener. The goal is insolvency. Bright Steps isn't trying to fix the district. They are trying to bankrupt it. The plan? I saw the deck in the board meeting, is to drive the operating deficit so high that the state forces a takeover. Once the state takes over, they mandate asset liquidation to pay the debts. The assets are the schools. Harbor Glen High sits on 40 acres of prime downtown real estate. The middle school is on the waterfront. They want to close the schools, declare the building surplus, and sell the land to Apex Strategies for pennies on the dollar. It is a land grab. They are going to bulldoze the high school and build condos, and they are using the tax dollars meant for the kids to pay for the demolition. The recording clicked off. I stared at the device. The room went dead silent. It wasn't just corruption. It wasn't just graft. It was an execution. They were deliberately starving the school system, manufacturing a crisis, so they could strip it for parts. "My God," I whispered. "They are going to close the school? They are going to eat the whole town." Nolan said. He stood up and paced the small room. "This changes the angle. Julia, this isn't a story about a bad teacher or a corrupt superintendent. This is a story about a conspiracy to dismantle public infrastructure for private profit." He looked at me. "But we have a problem." "What?" I asked. "The injunctions," he said. "If we run a pre-taped package, Bright Steps will have their lawyers in front of a judge within an hour of the first promo. They will claim the recording is stolen property. They will claim defamation. They will get a temporary restraining order to block the broadcast. They have the money to tie us up in court for months. By the time we air, the school will be closed. So what do we do?" I asked. "We go live." Nolan said. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "Live?" "Sunday night," Nolan said. "Prime time. No pre-roll, no promos that give away the details. We tease it as an exclusive investigation into school funding. We get you in the chair. The anchor asks the question. You tell the story. You play the recording. By the time their lawyers can wake up a judge, the signal is already out. You can't unring a bell on live television. It is dangerous. I said, if you mess up, you look like a liar. Nolan said, if you freeze, you look guilty. You have to be perfect. Julia, you have to be bulletproof. I looked at the black screen of my phone. I thought about the comments. Unstable, dangerous. I will do it, I said. Nolan nodded. Okay, we need to prep. But first, you need to handle your family. My family? Your father has been calling the station, Nolan said. He has been trying to get through to the executive producer. He claims he speaks for you. He claims you are having a mental health crisis and that any interview would be exploitation. I felt the blood rush to my face. He did what? He is trying to kill the story. Julia, and he is using his paternal rights to do it. You need to shut him down. I didn't want to call him. I wanted to disappear. But Nolan was right. If my own father was undermining my credibility, I was dead before I started. I turned my phone back on. It flooded with notifications, but I ignored them and dialed my parents' landline. My mother answered. Julia? Her voice was shrill. Where are you? There are reporters on the lawn. I ignored the question. Put Dad on. He is busy handling your mess, she snapped. Put him on. Mom, or I will come there with a camera crew. There was a clatter, and then my father's voice came on the line. He sounded breathless, angry, and strangely triumphant. Julia, thank God. I have been trying to reach you. I just got off the phone with Harrison from the board. I gripped the phone. Why are you talking to the school board? Dad? I am fixing this, he shouted. I am the only one thinking clearly. I had a meeting this morning, a private meeting with the Bright Steps director. I froze. You met with them? I went to the country club. He said, I sat down with them, man to man. I told them you were under a lot of strain. I told them you didn't mean any harm, Dad. What did you do? I whispered. I got you options. Julia, he said. Look, they are willing to drop the credential hearing. They are willing to seal your file. They even have a position for you, not in the classroom. Obviously, you are too volatile for that right now. But in their curriculum development office, it is a remote role, good salary, better than what you were making. I felt like I was going to be sick. You want me to work for them? I asked. You want me to work for the people who are stealing from my students? They are not stealing. Julia, they are businessmen. He was yelling now. And they are offering you a lifeboat. All you have to do is issue a public apology. Just a short statement saying you were confused, that you misinterpreted the data, and that you support the district's vision. I closed my eyes. It was so clear. They didn't just want my silence. They wanted my submission. And they were using my father to get it. They knew he was weak. They knew he craved their acceptance more than he respected my integrity. Dad, I said, my voice shaking. Did they promise you anything? What? Did they promise you anything for yourself? A contract? An introduction? There was a silence on the line. A beat too long. Don't be ridiculous, he blustered. I am doing this for you. I am trying to save you from ruining your life. You can't win this. Julia, you are a nobody. They are the establishment. I am not a nobody. I said, I am a witness. I am not going to let you do this. He said, I have told your mother. We are going to put out a statement ourselves. We are going to say you are seeking treatment. If you do that, I said, my voice turning into something hard and cold. I will sue you. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Dad, I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage. I looked at the timeline spread out on the hotel bed. I needed to know something else. I picked up the printed spreadsheet, the first one, the anonymous one from the envelope. I looked at the metadata at the bottom of the page. It was a faint string of characters. The printer ID stamp, Fin _ office _ copier _03. I looked at the date stamp, 10:14 a.m. I pulled up the district staff directory on my laptop. I had saved a cached version before they locked me out. I looked at the finance department. Who worked near copier 03? The office map was online. Copier 03 was in the back corner, near the break room. There were 2 desks there. One belonged to the director of finance, the other belonged to the junior analyst. I looked at the name of the junior analyst. Sarah Jenkins. I searched her name in my email archives. I found one email from 3 years ago. She had been a student teacher. She had asked to observe my debate class. I remembered her. Quiet, serious. She had told me she wanted to work in administration to make things fair. I searched her name online. Obituary, Sarah Jenkins, age 26. Died suddenly at home, cardiac arrest. The date of death was 2 weeks ago, 3 days after I received the envelope. I stared at the screen. Cardiac arrest at 26? I felt a chill that went deeper than the bone. It went into my soul. She had tried to warn me. She had printed that spreadsheet, and now she was dead. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe she had a heart condition. But the silence from the finance office, the fear in Marin's eyes, the way the accountant, Mason, was running for his life. It wasn't just a job. It was a body count. I turned to Nolan. The leak came from inside. I said, "A girl named Sarah Jenkins. She died 2 weeks ago." Nolan came over and looked at the screen. He didn't say anything for a long time. "We mention her," he said finally. "We don't accuse them of killing her. We can't prove that. But we mention that the source is gone. We put her name in the air. We make her matter." Saturday, the day before the broadcast. My phone number was doxed at noon. I had turned it back on to check a fact for Nolan, and within seconds. The call started. "You traitor? We know where you live. Leave our town. You are an ugly, bitter woman." They were coming every 3 seconds. I tried to block them, but there were too many. I turned the phone off again. I took the battery out, even though I knew that didn't really stop anything. I sat on the floor of the hotel room. I felt unmoored. The world was screaming at me, and I had no voice to scream back. "I need to go out." I told Nolan. "You can't," he said. "It is not safe. I need to see it." I said, "I need to see the school." I thought about the way her face lit up when she constructed a perfect argument. I thought about the kids who stayed late because they didn't want to go home. I thought about the ones who borrowed lunch money and never paid it back, and the ones who cried in my classroom because they were overwhelmed. They were just kids. They were messy and loud and frustrating, and they deserved a school that wasn't being sold out from under them to build condos for rich people. I wasn't a lowly teacher. I was the guardian of this place, and if I had to be destroyed to save it, then fine. I opened my eyes. A car had pulled into the lot behind me. I stiffened. I turned around slowly, expecting security, expecting the police. It was a silver Mercedes, my father's car. He got out. He was wearing his trench coat. The collar turned up against the rain. He looked older than I had ever seen him. His face was gray in the parking lot lights. "I knew you would come here," he said. "You always come here when you are being stubborn." "How did you find me?" I asked. "I followed the rental," he said. "I have been parked outside that hotel for 6 hours. Julia." He walked toward me, stopping a few feet away. "You have to stop," he said. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was desperate. "I can't stop. Dad, you don't understand," he said. He looked around at the dark lot. I talked to them again. Bright steps. They made it very clear what happens if you go on TV tomorrow. "What happens?" I asked. "They will ruin you. Julia, they will release your medical records. They will sue you for every penny you will ever make." And he swallowed hard. "And they will pull my contracts." I stared at him. "Your contracts?" "My firm," he said. "We insure 3 of their subsidiary companies. It is 40% of my business. Julia, if you do this, I lose the firm. I lose the house. Your mother, she won't be able to handle it." I looked at him, standing there in the rain, trading his daughter's integrity for his insurance premiums. "So that is the bargain," I said softly. "You sell me out, and you get to keep the house in Crestmore Ridge." "It is not selling you out," he cried. "It is survival. Why do you have to be so selfish? Why do you have to be the hero? Just sign the paper. Just take the job. We can all be safe." "Safe," I repeated. I looked at the school. I looked at the dark windows of my classroom on the second floor. I am not safe, Dad. I haven't been safe since I opened that email. And neither are you. You just don't know it yet. I turned back to him. I am going on that show tomorrow. Julia, please. I am going on that show. I said, my voice rising, cutting through the rain. And I am going to tell them everything. I am going to tell them about the leases. I am going to tell them about the recording. And I am going to tell them that my own father tried to bribe me into silence to save his commission. He stepped back as if I had slapped him. You wouldn't. I walked up to him. I stood toe-to-toe with the man who had dominated my life, who had made me feel small for 33 years. You called me a lowly teacher. Dad, you said I was glorified babysitting. You said I couldn't compete. I leaned in. Watch me. I saw it then. For the first time in my life, I saw it in his eyes. Fear. He wasn't looking at his disappointment anymore. He was looking at something he couldn't control. He was looking at a woman who had nothing left to lose, and that terrified him. Go home, Dad. I said, go home and tell Mom to turn on the TV tomorrow night. She wanted us to be famous. She's about to get her wish. I turned and walked back to the rental car. I didn't look back. I drove back to the hotel with my hands steady on the wheel. I sat down at the desk. I took a piece of hotel stationery and a pen. I didn't need a teleprompter. I didn't need a script. I wrote down 4 words. Sarah, Tessa, Mason, truth. I turned off the light. I didn't sleep, but I rested. The next morning, Sunday, the sky was clear. We drove to the studio in the city. It was a 3-hour drive. We didn't talk much. When we arrived, the studio was a hive of activity. People with headsets were running back and forth. The lights were blindingly bright. Nolan walked me to the makeup chair. You okay? He asked. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. I looked pale. But I looked real. I am ready, I said. A production assistant clipped a microphone to my collar. Testing. 1, 2. I walked onto the set. The anchor, a woman named Diane with sharp eyes and a serious face, shook my hand. We are live in 2 minutes. She said, just look at me. Ignore the cameras. Tell the truth. I sat in the chair. The studio lights felt like heat lamps. I could feel them out there. The district lawyers, glued to their screens, phones in hand, ready to call the station. My mother, sitting on her velvet sofa, horrifyingly transfixed. My father, pouring a scotch, praying for a power outage. Marin Pike, holding her breath. And the students, Tessa, the ones who needed someone to stand up. 30 seconds, the floor director shouted. I took a deep breath. 10 seconds. The red light on the camera blinked on. In 3, 2, 1. Good evening, Diane said, looking into the lens. Tonight, we bring you an exclusive story of corruption, intimidation, and the systematic dismantling of a public school system. Sitting with me is Julia Foster, a teacher from Harbor Glen who says she was fired for asking where the money went. Julia, thank you for being here. I looked at her. Thank you, Diane, I said. My voice didn't shake. But I wasn't just fired for asking. I was fired because I found the answer. And then I began. The studio air was freeze-dried and smelled of ozone and hairspray. I sat in the center of the set, a raised platform of plexiglass and chrome that felt less like a conversation pit and more like an operating theater. The lights above were blinding, a grid of white-hot stars that erased the rest of the room, leaving me suspended in a void of artificial brightness. A production assistant with a headset and a clipboard stepped into the light. She adjusted the microphone clipped to the lapel of my navy blazer, a blazer I had bought at a thrift store 3 hours ago because I had left my good suit in the apartment I could no longer return to. Testing, she murmured. Can you give me a level? Julia, just say your name and what you had for breakfast. My name is Julia Foster. I said. My voice sounded foreign in the quiet studio, and I didn't have breakfast. Diane, the anchor, sat across from me, in the waiting room. She had been brisk and professional, scrolling through notes on a tablet. Now, under the lights, she transformed. Her posture straightened, her eyes sharpened, and she emanated a terrifying kind of focus. She was the lens through which 5 million people were about to see me. The floor director raised his hand. 30 seconds. Diane leaned forward. Julia, listen to me. They are going to try to rattle you. Ignore the monitors. Look at my eyes. Tell the truth. It is the only thing that cuts through the noise. I nodded, my hands gripping the armrests of the chair so hard my knuckles turned white. 15 seconds. I thought about the timeline folded in my pocket. I thought about the ghost of Sarah Jenkins. I thought about the file box under the bed in the hotel room. 5, 4, 3, the red light on the camera blazed to life. Good evening, Diane said, her voice smooth and authoritative. Tonight, we begin with a story of education, money, and the price of asking questions. In the quiet suburbs of Harbor Glen, a massive public-private partnership promised to revolutionize learning. But one teacher says the only thing being revolutionized was a scheme to dismantle the public school system from the inside out. She turned to me. Julia Foster was a history teacher and debate coach at Harbor Glen High School until 4 days ago, when she was escorted from the building by security. Her district calls it a personnel matter. She calls it a cover-up. Julia, welcome. Thank you. Diane, I said, before we begin, Diane said, looking directly into the camera. I need to make a disclosure to our audience. 10 minutes before we went to air, this network received an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order filed by attorneys representing the Bright Steps Learning Foundation. They claim the documents we are about to show you are stolen proprietary material and that this broadcast is an act of defamation. My heart hammered against my ribs. They were trying to kill the feed. Even now, they were trying to pull the plug. Diane paused, letting the weight of the threat hang in the air. However, she continued, her voice hardening. Our legal department has reviewed the source material. These documents are public records. They are property deeds, municipal filings, and verified internal communications subject to the Freedom of Information Act. We are not broadcasting rumors. We are broadcasting the ledger. We are proceeding. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Diane turned back to me. Julia, take us back to the beginning. You were a teacher. You were tenured. You had a stable career. Why did you start looking at the budget? I didn't set out to look at the budget. I said, my voice shook on the first syllable, a tremor of pure nerves. But I swallowed it down. I was helping a student apply for a scholarship. I noticed a discrepancy in the provider names. It was a small thing. But when I asked about it, I was told it was above my pay grade. And that answer didn't satisfy you? It frightened me. I said, in my experience, when someone tells a teacher not to look at the paperwork, it is usually because the paperwork proves they aren't doing their job. So I looked. Diane nodded to the control room. Let's show our viewers what she found. A monitor to my left flickered to life. I watched as the pre-roll package Nolan's team had assembled played out. It was surreal. My late nights at the library, my frantic Google searches, the terrifying realization in the grocery store aisle, it had all been converted into sleek, high-definition graphics. A map of the city appeared. Red lines shot out from the school district headquarters, connecting to a web of shell companies, Apex Strategies, River City Solutions, Clearview Consulting. The voiceover narration was cool and detached. On paper, the district paid $150,000 for site readiness. But state records show Apex Strategies has no employees and operates out of a mailbox drop. The money was then transferred to River City Solutions, a consulting firm owned by the brother-in-law of the city council zoning chair. The screen flashed to a document, the lease for the warehouse on Elm Street. Here, the district pays $12,000 a month for a building Bright Steps bought for $200,000. In effect, the taxpayers of Harbor Glen are paying off the mortgage for a private equity firm, while the building itself sits empty. I watched the graphics spin and lock into place. It looked irrefutable. It looked like a crime scene. When the camera cut back to the studio, Diane's face was grave. That is a law of money. Julia, she said, millions of dollars diverted from classrooms. But you are not an accountant. You are a teacher. What happened when you tried to report this through the proper channels? I reported it to the ethics portal. I said. I followed the protocol. 2 days later, I was called into the principal's office. I wasn't thanked. I was threatened. They told me I was misusing internal documents. They told me I was unstable. Unstable, Diane repeated. That is a specific word. It is a weaponized word, I said. I looked directly into the lens, imagining my father sitting in his armchair, imagining Principal Vance watching in his office. They know that if they call a woman crazy, people stop listening to her facts. They started a file. They logged missed trainings that I had attended. They mandated wellness checks. They created a narrative that I was having a breakdown so that if I ever went public, they could say, "Oh, that's just poor Julia. She has been struggling for a while." And did it work? Diane asked. Did you feel unstable? I paused. I thought about the nights I spent staring at the ceiling, convinced the smoke detector was a camera. I thought about the way I jumped when the toaster popped. Yes, I said honestly, it works. You start to doubt your own memory. You start to wonder if maybe you are making a big deal out of nothing. That is the genius of the gaslight. It doesn't just hide the truth. It makes you afraid of it. The studio was deadly silent. The cameramen were motionless. But you didn't stop, Diane said, even when they threatened your license? I couldn't, I said, because I realized it wasn't just about the money. It was about the end game. Explain that, Diane said. They aren't just stealing the budget, I said, leaning forward. They are starving the school. They are cutting debate, art, remedial math. They are making the school fail on purpose. Because if the school fails, the state takes over. If the state takes over, they sell the building. And if they sell the building, Bright Steps is waiting to buy 40 acres of downtown real estate for pennies on the dollar. I took a breath. My students are being set up to fail so that a developer can build condos on their playing field. Diane looked down at her tablet. She tapped the screen, and her expression shifted. It was a shift I hadn't seen in rehearsal. It was the look of a journalist who had just been handed a loaded gun. Julia, she said, we have a development. I blinked. What? You mentioned an anonymous source in your pre-interview. Diane said, someone you called Mason, an accountant who reached out to our tip line but refused to meet in person. Yes, I said. He was terrified. He said he was running out of time. Diane looked at the camera. Tonight, we can reveal the identity of that source. Mason is not just an accountant. He is Arthur Penhaligon, the executive assistant to the chief financial officer of Bright Steps for the last 12 years. I gasped. The CFO's assistant? He would have seen everything, every email, every transfer. Diane continued. Mr. Penhaligon walked into a federal field office in Chicago 3 hours ago. He turned over a hard drive containing 10 years of unredacted ledgers. He is currently in protective custody. A graphic flashed on the screen. Breaking news. Federal whistleblower emerges. My hand flew to my mouth. He did it. He actually did it. He has issued a statement through his attorney. Diane read, I watched them move money for a decade. I watched them buy school board elections. I watched them destroy the careers of good teachers. I stayed silent because I was afraid. But when I saw them go after Ms. Foster, I realized they would never stop unless someone made them stop. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. I wasn't alone. I had never been alone. Diane turned back to me. Julia, state investigators have confirmed to this network that based on the documents you provided and Mr. Penhaligon's cooperation, they opened a preliminary inquiry at 5 o'clock this evening. The Attorney General's office is seizing records as we speak. I sat back in the chair. The breath rushing out of me. It was happening. The machine was jamming, but Diane wasn't finished. Julia, she said, her voice softening slightly, this has come at a great personal cost to you. We know you are currently staying in a hotel. We know you cannot go home. We also know that your own family has urged you not to be here tonight. I looked down at my hands. I saw the ink stain on my thumb from where I had nervously gripped a pen earlier. My father, I said quietly. He issued a statement to the local press this afternoon. Diane said, he claimed you were suffering from acute stress and that these allegations were the result of a mental health crisis. He apologized to the district on your behalf. I looked up. The anger I had felt in the parking lot was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. My father is a frightened man, I said. He works in insurance. His firm holds contracts with Bright Steps. He was told that if I spoke up, he would lose his livelihood. I looked into the camera. I pictured the living room in Crestmore Ridge. I pictured the velvet curtains and the oversized television. I knew he was watching. I knew my mother was sitting beside him, her hand over her mouth, watching the daughter she had called a disappointment dismantle the world she desperately wanted to belong to. He isn't speaking as a father, I said. He is speaking as a hostage. And that is how this system works. It turns families against each other. It uses your mortgage, your car payment, your reputation to keep you in line. My father chose his safety over the truth. I don't hate him for it, but I won't join him in it. Diane nodded slowly. It was a powerful moment, the kind of moment that wins awards. She checked the time. We have 1 minute left. Julia, what happens next? You can't go back to Harbor Glen High. No, I said, I suppose I can't. So what do you want? Diane asked. Do you want your job back? Do you want a settlement? I looked at the studio lights. I thought about the offer of $50,000. I thought about the lowly teacher insult. I thought about the silence of the hallways after the bell rang. I don't want a settlement. I said, I don't want their money. I looked directly at the lens. The red light was a burning eye. I want the truth to stop being treated like misconduct. I want the people who signed those leases to answer for them. I want my students to know that being a citizen means speaking up even when your voice shakes. I leaned forward. And there is one more thing. Diane. Diane looked surprised. She hadn't prepped for this. One more thing? The documents we showed tonight. I said, the shell companies, the zoning. That is just the local mechanics. But there is a reason the state never audited Harbor Glen. There is a reason the complaints were always buried. I saw Nolan in the wings. He stiffened. This wasn't in the script. I received a file from the finance office before my source died. I said, a list of wire transfers from the Bright Steps donor fund. I paused. The studio was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the electricity. There is a recurring monthly payment of $10,000. I said, it is labeled consulting. It goes to a blind trust. Julia, Diane said, a warning note in her voice. We haven't verified. I verified it. I said, the trust is registered to the husband of the State Superintendent of Education. The heir left the room. The state superintendent was the highest education official in the state. She was the one who appointed the auditors. She was the one who approved the grant waivers. I named her, Patricia Vance. I said, the principal's sister-in-law. Chaos erupted. I heard shouting in Diane's earpiece. I saw the floor director waving his arms frantically. Nolan's face was a mask of shock. I had just implicated a constitutional officer on live television without legal vetting. Diane's eyes went wide. She opened her mouth to speak, to pivot, to cut me off. But the screen went black. They cut the feed. The monitor to my left, which had been showing the broadcast, snapped to a generic technical difficulties card and then abruptly switched to a commercial for a dishwasher detergent. The studio lights stayed on, but the connection was severed. Diane ripped her earpiece out. Jesus Christ! Julia! She shouted. You can't just drop the superintendent's name with 10 seconds left. Do you have the receipts for that? I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded piece of paper, the last page Sarah Jenkins had printed before her heart stopped. I slammed it onto the glass table. Yes, I said, I have the receipts. Nolan ran onto the set. He looked at me, then at the paper, then at the black monitors. He started to laugh. It was a wild, terrified sound. We are off air, he said. They pulled the plug at the master control in New York. Did we get it out? I asked. Nolan looked at his phone. It was vibrating so hard it was blurring in his hand. Twitter is melting down, he said. The hashtag is #Patricia Vance. You got it out. Julia, you lit the fuse. I sat back in the chair. The adrenaline crashed out of me, leaving me shaking. I had done it. I had said the quiet part out loud. I had burned the bridge, the boat, and the map. I thought about my father. He was probably sitting in the dark now, the TV screen glowing with the commercial break, his phone ringing with calls from people he used to try to impress, people who were now realizing that his daughter had just ended their careers. I stood up. My legs felt like water. Is it over? I asked. Nolan looked at me. He looked at the security guards who were now gathering at the edge of the set, looking unsure of whether to escort me out or arrest me. Over? Nolan said. Julia, you just took down the state superintendent and a $100 million developer in 20 minutes. He stepped closer and put a hand on my shoulder. This isn't over. The war just started. And you just became the most dangerous woman in America. I looked at the dark camera lens. I wasn't a teacher anymore. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was something else. I walked off the set, past the stunned cameramen, past the frantic producers. I walked toward the exit sign glowing red in the darkness. I pushed the doors open and stepped out into the cool night air of the city. I didn't know where I was going to sleep. I didn't know if I would be arrested in the morning. But for the first time in 10 years, I breathed, and the air didn't taste like chalk and fear. It tasted like fire. Thank you for listening to My Parents Called Me Just a Lowly Teacher, until Dad saw me on national TV that night. This was a story about the courage it takes to stand alone when the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones selling you out. I hope Julia's journey resonated with you. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to stand up to authority or family to do the right thing? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. We have many more tales of justice, redemption, and turning the tables coming your way. Don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in English. See you in the next story.